Hello and welcome to SafeR Journeys, a podcast dedicated to raising children, ending violence, and ending oppression. I'm Heather, one of your co-hosts. I'm here with Melissa.
Hello, I'm Melissa. I'm the Community Engagement Director with Safe Journeys, and Heather is on the prevention team here, and I absolutely love having her on this team. She adds so much to it.
That's so nice. It makes me happy. Me and Melissa just spent quite a bit of time chatting, so I think we're like extra something. I don't know what the word might be.
Connected?
Yeah, maybe. But either way, I feel like it's going to like spill over in a positive way to today's podcast. So.
I think so too. And today we are going to be wrapping up our LGBTQ series. And I know we tend to give our trigger warning at the beginning about, we are a domestic and sexual violence agency. And so naturally, like subject matter, like domestic and sexual violence happens in our content, but sometimes other things end up coming up too, and especially connected to things like oppression and marginalization and those kinds of experiences. So I just wanted to mention that.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
The isms.
Would you mind summing up the LGBTQ series that we've had?
Yeah. So we did way more in the mini series than we had expected to do, but we were just so excited to share this information that we couldn't hold back. So
it's like not really a mini series anymore.
No, it's like half of a season.
Yeah.
But, it's important to us, and it's important to the movement to end oppression and violence as a whole. So we decided we were going to stick to keeping the series as long as we have. But this is our last episode. We did cover a few other things, so let's quickly remember. Episode 2, we talked about just the current climate for LGBTQIA plus young people. We talked a bit about the legislation that had been proposed and put into play, and how detrimental that is, particularly to trans young people. In episode 3, we talked about some of those mental health and physical effects of experiencing this oppression. We know that young people with that identify as LGBTQIA plus have pretty high levels of mental health distress. So they may have some suicidality, they may be experiencing anxiety, they may be experiencing depression. We know that this consequence of being discriminated against has caused a lot of mental health problems and struggles for young people, particularly in the LGBTQ community. Then in episode 4, we kind of did like a little basics of terminology. We went through what LGBTQIA plus stands for. And then in the previous episode, we talked about how we can be better allies and create safe spaces for folks that identify as members of this community.
Yeah, thanks for that summary. It's kind of like one of those end of the series kind of sum ups of all the episodes that have come before it. Yeah. And so this is like your series finale now.
Oh, yeah.
I know. Well, don't get too excited, I guess. I don't want to put too much pressure on it. But I did want to introduce people, especially caregivers and like educators and administrators, to the U.S. Department of Education has put out this toolkit for creating inclusive and non-discriminatory school environments for LGBTQIA plus students. And, there are a lot of amazing implementation guides and things out there. There are wonderful guides and that explain more of like approaches to incorporating LGBTQ figures in history and literature and math and science and all those kinds of things. And I'm not going to be able to mention all of them here today, which is why I wanted people to see that like there's a toolkit from the U.S. Department of Education, and I wanted to share what's included in that and just kind of go through it a little bit so that like if you haven't checked it out yet, at least you get a summary here and you can see whether or not you want to check it out. Mm-hmm. So what is included in this? First of all, there's information on supporting LGBTQIA plus youth and families in school from the U.S. Department of Education, which is helpful. And that's actually one of the things I'm going to go more in depth into. Secondly, there's a Q&A resource on student-led groups to support LGBTQIA plus students and allies from the U.S. Department of Education, and that mostly goes into information on like GSA, which is either a gay straight alliance or a gender sexuality alliance, and then like it lists the benefits to the students, and then it talks about the Equal Access Act. Again, I'm not going to be going into this one in particular, but I just wanted you all to know that there are actually like there's some really good stuff in there about GSAs and like how it benefits students, how important that is. And we've talked about that in this series. And then what the Equal Access Act is. So it does go into that. Thirdly, it provides a resource called the LGBTQ Supportive School Policies and Practices Help All Students Thrive. And this is from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Division of Adolescent and School Health, which is fabulous because you can see it really talks about how when you have supportive school policies and practices in place, not only are the LGBTQ students going to thrive, but everybody is going to thrive, because when we center those on the margins, everybody thrives. Yep. Next, they provide information on the Community Relations Service, the CRS, from the U.S. Department of Justice, which was established by Title X of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And this is a mandate that was expanded in 2009 through the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act. So
I remember the Matthew Shepard.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that was tragic.
Yeah, I think that was the first time I learned about hate crimes. What does it say what year that was?
You know, it says the mandate was expanded in 2009. I'm not remembering.
I just remember feeling pretty young.
Yeah.
When that happened and being really impacted. Because I wasn't aware that people would murder someone because of their sexual orientation. Like, I just never thought about that. So yeah, that was a hard one.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important that the U.S. Department of Justice, the U.S. Department of Education keeps putting these things in front of us in toolkits like this so that we're reminded and it's like, oh, wow, yeah, that's why these Title 9, Title 10, of the Civil Rights Act are so important, and that they're expanded on. Yeah.
And I think, at least for me, if I wasn't doing this work, I wouldn't be looking at what Title IX and Title X and all the time, Yeah. So I think it's good that we're sharing and reminding folks to go take a look at those, especially if you're working in environments with young people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there are a lot of things you just may not be aware of. You may not be in compliance.
Right.
And not out of maliciousness, but you just weren't aware. So it is good to go through and take a look at it, and if you can, find some resources that help break down the language, because sometimes, like if you're reading that straight out of the legislature, it is bulky.
Yeah, and like a lot of legal jargon.
Yeah, sometimes I have to like Google what a term means or something. So, but there are lots of resources like this to help with that.
Yeah, and I also appreciate that the Prevention Act is called the Hate Crimes Prevention Act, naming it for what it is.
Yeah.
Because what is also included, this is one of the last things that's included in the toolkit, is a hate crimes threat guide from the U.S. Department of Justice, the FBI, which it walks you through definitions, examples, and reporting of physical, verbal, phoned, electronic, and written or visual threats. So like how to handle those things. It just really stinks that like we have to think about that and like have a plan for how we're going to respond to being threatened.
Yeah.
And how to report it, how to,
Yeah, I had not seen this FBI threat kind of guide prior to this document. And I really appreciated it, because it is very easy to read and definitely helps you, like, this is what's happening. You look right at the box and like can take those steps. So I think it is really helpful, and especially prior to an incident occurring.
Right.
If you can have that information already, on board, that's going to be very helpful for you navigating it in that moment.
And I would think as an administrator, you would want your your staff and faculty to be on the same page with this.
I would hope
procedure.
so. I mean, that would make things move a lot smoother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would hope that this threat guide also is reflected in school policy and procedure.
Yeah, it would be nice.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure it's there, but it would make sense.
It is a helpful document that would allow for that to take place. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So pretty much this whole document is resources and methods for supporting LGBTQ plus young people as well as their families in a school setting. And when you think about this, remember, it may be the parents, right, that are the LGBTQIA members and not the child. So it could be either or both, and these resources will help with that. So I had mentioned, again, lots of negative emotional and mental health consequences of being discriminated against and the stigma that is sometimes carried with being an LGBTQIA person. And of course, you're going to internalize those things. It is hard not to, especially when you are a young person and your brain is still forming. So it's really important we have documents like this. You're going to see there's some good examples of policies and practices that schools can implement, like very well written, very clear. And I also noticed there was some, at the very end, some funding opportunities that different schools could look through. And that was exciting for me as well. So in the world of policy and procedure, one of the things this document recommends, and this is something we do here at Safe Journeys as well, is having mission statements or proclamations that are going to use welcoming and inclusive language. And we actually have an anti-discrimination, we don't call it a proclamation. What do we call it? Anti-statement? Yeah, anti-discrimination statement that explicitly says we are committed to providing a safe and supportive, non-discriminatory environment for people who work here, as well as the people that we serve and the people in our community. And that's something educators or administrators can do, is to have such a thing, a proclamation or a mission statement or an anti-discrimination statement that does explicitly express that, in particular related to the educational environment for students.
Yeah, I want to back up just a second because it felt like almost a throwaway when you said that there was a list of funding opportunities, because I think that's often a barrier people like to point out to implementing things like this. And so I appreciate that the toolkit is actually, there are funding opportunities so you can help make these things happen if they do have a cost to them. Some of these things do not have a cost, like using more welcoming, inclusive language, that has a potential cost if you need some supplies or whatever, but it also, you can implement things that don't have a cost at all.
One of those grant programs a neighboring county had utilized at their high school, and they had brought someone in to run the GSA, and they were teachers as well, so they did they also did the teaching, but the sole purpose was to have this person there to run the GSA. And I talked to some students who were a part of that. They're now college students, so they were telling me about this in the past, and they really, really, really appreciated it, and were using ideas of things they did in their GSA in high school and bringing it to the GSA in their college environment. So I think that alone shows the value of these programs.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's one more. So Little Justice Leaders is this organization that is all about supporting inclusion and, providing caregivers a resource that they can have the conversations about kind of tough things, or maybe hot button topics nowadays with their kiddos. And so I really appreciate Little Justice Leaders has this mini course about supporting trans, non-binary, and queer students. And the first video has this person named Ace sharing how shifting our language in small ways can make a meaningful difference. And like I said, this doesn't cost anything, to make these little shifts. So they have some suggestions. So choose an inclusive phrase to address the students. And I know I use you guys a lot, and we've talked about this in past episodes, that is gendered language. And by choosing a phrase like everyone or something fun like epic humans or rock stars, we are using language that's not tied up in the common binary. Also, reading books that feature kiddos that are non-binary.
It is such an easy way it's just you don't have to say anything else on it. You just read the book like you normally would.
And like that could be one of the books that the library gets for that year or something, right? Like, again, maybe it's a cost to the school in one way because the school library is getting it, but you could also go check it out from your library in your city. So you can read My Shadow is Purple by Scott Stewart. And this is just one example, right? This is a heartwarming and inspiring book about being true to yourself and moving beyond the gender binary by the best-selling author of My Shadow is Pink.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I've seen the My Shadow is Pink book. I haven't read it, but like whenever I Google like inclusive books for children, because that's the kind of things I Google, I see My Shadow is Pink shows up quite a bit.
Yes.
Other things that can be beneficial in your written protocols or policies is having something explicitly discussed in your protocol about pronoun usage. So include some kind of statement that's going to say that pronouns shouldn't be assumed, and have a policy regarding the singular use of they if someone is unsure what pronoun to use and is not comfortable asking. And I usually say use they unless otherwise directed or unless you feel comfortable asking if they use pronouns. So just having something written, and it doesn't have to be exactly like we're saying, but something that people can like lean on when they're not sure how to act. And like this will develop and get bigger and better as time goes on, but it's nice to have a starting point. And I think in this protocol or written statement, you should mention how pronouns might change, particularly with young people who are trying to figure out their identities. And I mean, this is also possible for adults, but young people change in a lot more frequency, I think, than adults do. They're way more fluid.
Yes.
And do a little bit better maybe than us adults do when it comes to that. But it's important that we allow them to figure themselves out and we embrace, like this week, one of my students is going by they, them, and, in a couple weeks, they might decide they're going to go back to he, him. And great, awesome, supporting that journey. We love that you're experimenting and seeing what works for you.
Yeah, and I think what that says is that your classroom is a safe space for them to explore who they are, which is beautiful.
And that's the best way to learn in general, is to feel safe in the environment and be able to be curious and explore without worry of shame or stigma or punishment.
Right.
Like I learn much better that way for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And again, in this protocol, you're going to want to have something about how to respond if you make a mistake. There are a lot of different ways that you can put this down, but my favorite is, oops, sorry, I meant blah, blah, blah. So that's my favorite, but you want to make sure you're saying sorry or thank you for pointing that out and then making the correction and committing to continuing to use the appropriate pronoun. And not making it a huge deal, even though it might feel like a huge deal inside.
Right.
Because it feels like a huge deal to me inside when I make an error. And I have to like really suppress that so I don't make it about me.
Yes.
And then as well, you may want to just think about instituting a pronoun mascot. And this can be at home or at school. I think this is a really fun way to introduce pronouns. And I'm telling you, the language arts teachers, they really need to embrace this because they could do so much with teaching pronouns.
Yes.
Like the written language of pronouns, not so much even, making sure we're respecting people's. It's just like putting these together seems like a natural thing for me. And I hope that other educators are doing this. So this pronoun mascot can be whatever you want it to be. It could be a plant. It could be a stuffed animal. It could be a lamp. It could really be anything you want. If you have a little gerbil or something, like some of the classrooms will have like a hamster or a bunny.
Yes.
That can be your pronoun mascot because your gerbil or bunny is not going to care what pronouns you use in regards to them.
Yes.
So it gives you and the students and families an opportunity to practice using singular they particularly, but using alternate pronouns without hurting someone. So it's a way to practice without causing harm.
And I love that because, you know, the classroom is a learning zone and you're creating this awesome opportunity to practice something that you're trying to teach, right?
Yeah.
And like people need to practice over and over and over. And even and when they mess up, they can practice messing up too and what to do.
Yeah. I know we make it sound so easy, right? Yeah. It's because we've done a lot of messing up.
That's right. Which I laugh, but it's like, I remember when I messed up, but I also remember saying sorry and them going, like shaking their head, like, no, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, or in even checking in with me after and being like, thank you for trying. And I can tell like this matters to you. And I'm like, oh, good, because it does. And I'm sorry I messed up. And they're like, it's okay.
I know. Messing up is hard. It's hard in general. And honestly, I'm grateful for having this practice and having a space where I can say like, I mess up sometimes.
Yes.
And that's normal and it's okay. And just how I move through that is what's important.
Yeah. And they see that.
I hope so.
Yeah. All right. So make sure you get permission with the student to use their pronouns with their parents or caregivers, and because this might be a space where they feel safe, but maybe home isn't that place. And you can make a difference creating this environment. And many times it's the one teacher who gave space for a student to be exactly who they are that makes all the difference in their life. And I was listening to a podcast on the way here, kind of like Heather does, if you've listened to our podcast before. And I was listening to Queer America and the final episode of it.
Because we love it so much.
Yes, we love it so much. And they have created an implementation guide. And I was listening to an idea about creating a survey at the beginning of the year where not only do they share their pronouns, but like also where they use those particular pronouns, so that because this could be a situational kind of thing. I
know we individually and together have had young people share with us that they cannot be out at home.
That's right.
And that school is their place where they can be. And I think that's really, really powerful. I'm sad that they can't be out at home, but I'm very happy that their schools have made it a safe space for them to be their authentic selves.
Yeah. Yeah. And in my case, it was a queer youth group, basically. I swear over 50% of the young people were identifying on the LGBTQIA spectrum, which said a lot.
Yeah.
About the space that we created together. But I think too, like when they say, please don't use those pronouns, like, please, like listen to them, take their lead, because they might not be out to their parents. I think sometimes they're like, I know what my parents are going to be okay. It's just like, I'm just not ready.
Yeah.
Cool. That's
absolutely fine.
Yeah.
But like there is the potential that it won't be a safe space.
Right.
That harm could come. We know a lot of young people get kicked out of their homes.
That's right.
When they disclose their gender or sexuality that doesn't align with what their parents had wanted for them. So, or they've made the child's life so hard at home that they have to leave. We see a lot of young people who are runaway homeless youth because they can't come out or did, and harm came to them. Yeah.
So it is so important that we are creating these safe, supportive spaces. And just like our last episode we did about creating safer spaces, again, the U.S. Department of Education just like really highlights facilitate opportunities for students to find support. from peers, from teachers, from staff, and then identify those supportive spaces on campus and make it known.
Yeah. Because if they don't know, they can't use it.
Yeah. We know that studies have shown that these supportive environments help all students experience less violence, harassment, and distress, and that's from the CDC. Also, provide professional development for educators on ensuring equitable and supportive treatment of historically underserved students, including LGBTQIA plus youth. And I think that's important too, and shows a dedication to this work and to creating safer, supportive spaces for young people, because we can't do that without the educators on board.
No, our kids, how much time do our kids spend in school? You know,
so much.
It's a huge part of their life and their development and growth. Mm-hmm. It is extremely important that these are safe, welcoming, and inclusive spaces where they can explore who they are and who they want to be.
Yes. Because these are the people, they're going to be the citizens, voting and making decisions and working and having families, whatever those families look like.
Yeah, and laying this groundwork now is building, young adults who are capable, who are secure, and have good self-worth.
And I think showing them representation of themselves, oh my goodness, their potential and possibilities open up for them so much, and they can see this isn't new. LGBTQ people aren't new.
They've always been here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And look at all the amazing things they've done.
Yeah.
And it wasn't always like this.
And we can celebrate their resilience as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I love that too.
Yeah.
And then protect LGBTQIA plus students from book bans that create a hostile environment in violation of federal civil rights laws. What's really great, and not to brag, but we're in the state of Illinois. Governor J.B. Pritzker has recently signed a bill making Illinois the first state to outlaw book bans. Seriously, I am rejoicing with the teachers and librarians who are book censorship does not work. In fact, let's highlight banned books.
I love when I see, because we are safe, books are not banned here in Illinois.
Right.
A lot of our libraries have been highlighting the banned books and doing activities and displays. And I don't know why I love it so much. I guess because it feels rebellious.
I know. I was it's the rebel in you.
I think it is down with authority. No, I'm just kidding. But I absolutely feel that way. And it makes me so happy. And I've seen stickers. I don't know. It makes me so happy, and it makes me feel safer. I know that sounds wild that they don't ban books. It makes you feel safer. I feel we're not controlling people's minds.
Yeah.
And what they, what information they have access to. And that's what makes me feel safer.
I mean, and that's helping you feel safer.
And I am not a member of the LGBTQIA community.
Just think that's a protection.
Yeah. It's definitely a protective
have these
factor.
Books be banned. It's a protective factor.
And I think the banning of the books, the message it sends to individuals who might see themselves represented in those banned books is that you don't belong.
Yep.
You are othered. Yeah. You should not be here. You are bad. It's really bad.
You're banned.
Yeah, we're shunning you.
You don't deserve to be on the bookshelf.
And some of the books they have banned, I don't even understand why. So we're not going to get into that, but withholding information and knowledge is never okay.
No.
And it will negatively impact everyone's ability to feel like their authentic selves.
Yeah.
Did you have any more to say on book bans? I feel like I took over because I got excited.
We don't love book bans. We love protective factors, and this is definitely a protective factor.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I was just excited because I think there's a lot of people rejoicing here in Illinois, but I feel for the states who do have book bans in place and do have restrictions on their curriculum for school. And it's hard enough, I think, with all of the mandates and the relationships between families, communities, and teachers and administrators. I think there's just a lot there. And
yeah, there's a lot of complexity.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And like adding a banned book or banned books is just increasing that because not everybody's going to be on the same page.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, if you don't like the book, don't read it.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to make everybody else not read it. Like, you can say you hate Catcher in the Rye. That is okay. You can have a literary criticism about it, but we're not going to ban it because you didn't like it.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, at least in my world or the Goodreads world, we call that like a DNF, like do not finish.
Oh, okay.
I did not finish that book.
Really?
Like, it wasn't worth finishing to the end.
I understand.
You could just DNF it, like, which sounds bad, but like it's just did not finish.
My partner cannot not finish a book.
Even if it's not
even
a good
if
book?
he does not like it. He can't. He feels like the goal is to finish for him. To me, it's to gain knowledge or to enjoy it. For him, is to like complete the task. So a lot of times we're like, yeah, this book stinks. I would not have chosen to read this. And I'm like, you don't have to.
Yeah, like just give it back.
We can just donate that. You don't have to look at it again. And he's like, nope, got to finish it. And meanwhile, here I am. I'm like 2 chapters and I'm like, this stinks. I'm done. Yeah, I don't know. It's pretty funny, but
he feels loyalty to
he really does. And meanwhile, I'm like, meh. You know, I might reread a book or like, I may be excited about a book, but I'm never unwilling to put it down. And if the book, you can put down any book, you don't have to ban them.
Yeah.
But there's so many other options.
Right.
Burn it your own copy if you want.
Yeah.
Buy 10 copies. Great. That gets money to the author, right?
And then you can burn those too.
Please. You're supporting the author if you do that. Anyways.
Just kidding. Don't burn books. But but you know what we mean. Like,
yeah. Okay, so moving on from banned books, because I would talk about it forever. Melissa and I both would probably.
Yes.
Make sure that we have in writing somewhere in the handbook or some sort of policy or protocol that the students have a right to be free from harassment and discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. If you are not familiar, this is almost the exact verbiage for Title IX. So Title IX is this. It is supposed to protect students from a hostile learning environment. And things like harassment or bullying or discrimination based on sex or gender is a hostile environment. Currently, Biden is trying to roll out some new rules in Title IX that are going to support students that are members of the LGBTQ plus community. It is not cemented yet, unfortunately. Adding some of these extra things in will in the long term be helpful, but in the short term, it means we don't have an updated Title IX, which is a bummer because there are a lot of changes that need to happen and seemingly will be happening provided this review process goes as expected. And then make sure that is, of course, in your mission statement as well. I mean, this is a compliance issue, really. Like, you have to put it in there. This isn't like, do it because you're a good human. This is like, you have to.
This is Title IX.
Yeah, this is this is
part of the Civil Rights Act.
Do you want funding from the federal government? You need to do this.
Yes.
So that's like what the punishment would be. Or lawsuits. They can do civil lawsuits, which is even more damaging. So just keep in mind, compliance is a really big deal when it comes to Title IX.
Yes.
Also, we want schools to make sure they are taking steps to prevent and reduce bullying, and not just bullying targeted at people that are LGBTQ+, but bullying as a whole. And there should be trainings, there should be activities. You're not just standing simply in front of the room and saying bullying is bad. That is not enough. I'm sure if you are an educator, you know that's not enough. There are a lot of resources. One of the things that our preventionists do, because this is so important and so tied to reducing violence against individuals, is we have a bullying prevention unit that our K through 12 educator, well, not K through 12, is it K through 5?
Yeah, K through 5.
Our educators teach to the young people in their schools. There's a curriculum for it even. You don't
That's
don't have to develop your own curriculum. It's already out there. It's Second Steps curriculum, right?
Yep. And it includes things like staff trainings. It includes examples of policy and procedure.
There's like videos, right? That I'm pretty sure
yeah.
videos, and I know there's activities for sure.
And so like it's all inclusive. Like it's really looking at not only the curriculum in the classroom, but it's looking at a whole school approach to preventing bullying
and going home, right? Because I thought I've seen like handouts or resources sent home to parents that can help support the learning that was done in that class. Yeah, that's awesome. The other thing that's cool, I think, particularly about Second Steps and bullying prevention unit, is it can be linked in or tied in with the social emotional learning curriculum that Second Steps also provides.
Right.
And just doing social emotional learning curriculum is bullying prevention, because if you're teaching young folks to regulate their emotions and think about how they're feeling and checking in with their bodies, you're going to reduce those stress responses that cause bullying or the need to control other people. So I think they are very much intertwined, and doing those two things together would be amazing.
And these things are in the mandates. This one's really tied into the Violence Prevention and Conflict Resolution Act. And so this is a mandate where they need to be learning, like, okay, so how do we define bullying? How do we respond to bullying? How do we prevent it from happening? How do we create a school climate that does not tolerate bullying, basically? Yeah.
And I love that there is a curriculum, and it's a pretty well accepted curriculum by educators and by students. So I think it's well supported. People enjoy it. It does the job. It gets what it needs done.
And I know there's a bunch of other ones out there too. We're just familiar with Second Step, but any social emotional learning curriculum, it probably has some kind of unit having to do with bullying prevention, probably has some kind of unit that does some of the other things that we have as well, like the body safety lessons, things like that.
Am I wrong in saying Second Step is one of the CDC supported curriculums, or do you know?
I swear. Okay. It's actually one of the like when we have to talk about like what our violence prevention plan is, there's certain strategies that are like the CDC approved ones that like they've tested, all that stuff. Yeah. And Second Step.
Okay. I thought so, because I swear I had seen that in one of their educational like toolkit package things.
Yes.
Cool. And then we have to make sure that we're being specific and we are reinforcing all the time that bullying of anyone is not acceptable, and bullying a person for any sort of identity that they hold will not be tolerated. Be clear about your code of conduct as well. A lot of these things you can add into your code of conduct or your school handbook. It doesn't just have to be like policies and protocols. Add it wherever people are going to be looking at it. So make sure your code of conduct says no discrimination and no discipline to someone based on their gender identity, expression, or sexual orientation. And if we don't write these things down very clearly, there's room for misinterpretation. So be very, very clear.
That's right. And in that same vein, make it clear that school activities for families, such as teacher conferences, family picnics, or other events, that these events are welcome for all types of families, including students with LGBTQIA plus parents or guardians. And then we talked about this in episode 5, like ungendering language, right? Like, so using parent or guardian rather than moms and dads, using siblings rather than brothers and sisters. So I just think it's important that, you can do it with more than just like your language. You can do it with your images, like the images you use on the posters you send home or whatever. Yeah. Like just try to make them look maybe sometimes genderless, but also if like just, put two dads together and some kids, you know, as a representation of a family, or two moms, or make them look more non-binary, you know, because I know at least, you know, we use Canva for a lot of our materials. And so we try really hard to find images, which is kind of tough going through all the
It depends on what it is, but occasionally it can be difficult.
Like finding more non-binary looking people in the stock images. So I do think it's important though, because it's worth the time to look through all of the images there, because people need to see that representation. Yeah,
sometimes when I struggle to find like something specific, like maybe I'm looking at a couple intersection identities, like I want it to be a non-binary person of color. You know, every time I add another identity in there, it makes it a little bit more difficult to find that person represented. You can go to Google and find it and cut and paste that image into whatever program you're using. You don't have to stick with the stock photos that are available just in that program.
Yeah.
And like sometimes that's what I have to do.
Yeah, because like the resources are limited.
Yep.
But all right, here's another tip from the U.S. Department of Education. So designate at least one staff member who is knowledgeable about issues related to sexual orientation and gender identity, who the school community members can approach to discuss their challenges, experiences, or questions. I think it's always great to have somebody you can go to and like maybe process something that happened and maybe you don't feel so good about it, or maybe you failed to interrupt another teacher who was misgendering the person even though they knew their pronouns. Like, and even practicing like, How might I interrupt somebody in the future in a way that's respectful, of course, but I think it's so great to have that practice and that person you can bounce things off of. So I really appreciate them saying like, identify
a designated person.
Yes, a staff member who is going to be the person to go to.
Yeah, it'd be cool if you can like come up with a fun title. I don't know what that would be, like the rainbow director.
I was gonna say the rainbow something.
Yeah, like that's what we always go to, right? But or the unicorn, like I don't know, but something fun. So it's not just like jargony. It's not like you know, community engagement with marginalized community, you know, that's not exciting, but like coming up with some alternative fun name, I think would be beneficial because it makes it more welcoming for individuals.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Also expand those mental health resources for LGBTQIA plus students. We've already shared like the extensive mental health stuff going on and like how marginalization and oppression impacts our young people. And so since they experience more mental health challenges and because of the discrimination, they need this. And fortunately, the Department of Education does provide funds to do this kind of work specifically, so you can apply to get those funds.
Yeah. I know, Melissa and I know, writing grants, applying for grant funding takes a lot of time and it's stressful.
Yes.
And like, especially if you're really excited about it, you know, and then you're like, oh, they were supposed to tell us last week. We haven't heard. Do make the effort. I think people underestimate the likelihood of getting those funds. Maybe I can't imagine Melissa and I are just that good at it. Like, I mean, we're okay at it.
I was a novice,
but like, it's out there, and like, they need to get. They're not holding on to these funds. So like, if you don't apply, you don't have the opportunity.
Yeah.
So take the time. I know it's not fun, but you can do it, and it's worth it in the long run.
It definitely is.
Okay, so another thing you really need to think about, and this is very much aligned with where you can use someone's pronouns or chosen name or recognize they have a different gender or sexual orientation. So privacy policies like the Family Educational Right and Privacy Act, which you've probably heard of as FERPA, some of these privacy policies are regulated. You have to have them. So consider that. We want to safeguard our students' privacy as much as we can. They are, even though they are not grown adults, they still deserve privacy and discretion. And then it's important that we do this so we don't make mistakes. Because like we mentioned, the consequences, could be very significant for a student. We don't want to cause harm ever.
No.
Be sure that all of the staff and faculty at a school are educated in how they should and can support students and their families that identify in this community. So that's going to be things like, how do you talk about a child's gender or sexual orientation? Like I said, a lot of kids out at school, not at home. Some schools have developed, and this is so flippin' cool, gender support plans to support their non-binary and transgender students. So like the plan would have regular check-ins. It would discuss who can and, you know, who is and isn't allowed to know this student's identity. It's going to include what names, what pronouns, and like who maybe their safe person might be if they don't have one at home, right? Like maybe their aunt so-and-so is a good person to call if they need support outside of school in this realm. I just can't say how much I love that. When I saw that, my heart like I was just so happy. I was like, it's like an IEP.
Yeah.
But it's to support the individual's authentic gender identity.
Yeah.
And I think, gosh, I just know so many students who this would have been foundational for. And I wish that this had been a part of their upbringing.
Yeah.
And in school, I mean, of course.
Me too. And I think there's just so many particular things for trans students to identify and figure out how to navigate too. Like even like if they are choosing to wear a binder, let's say, like there's only so many hours they can do that at a time.
Yeah.
In a healthy way. And so like having that support person for you on, you know, your school campus, like that would be really helpful because they could help like, hey, let's identify when in the day you're going to take a break.
Yeah. And like, where's the safe space to take that break?
Yeah.
Right? Because I think that would be important too. And honestly, the young people may not even be aware that it is unhealthy to wear particularly restricted. If they're a little bit looser, it's okay. But like depending on how tight it is,
right,
it can inhibit your breathing and your digestion.
Yes.
So if a student isn't aware of that, we would hate to see some negative consequences from this thing that's supposed to help them. So like being able to help them identify like maybe at lunchtime is the time we take off the binder. And maybe we eat lunch in the nurse's office or somewhere that they feel safe, and maybe they don't want their co-students, I was going to say colleagues, they don't want their peers to know that they're taking off a binder, so they don't want to be seen without it.
And like maybe they schedule counseling after a certain time, and that's when they take it off, put it back on after.
There's just so many ways we can support these young people.
Yeah, I was really excited by that support plan too.
Yeah. And I like that you brought up things like the binders, because I think a lot of older folks don't even know what binders are. Yeah. So I think that person might even be able to bridge that discussion between a student and a caregiver. Yeah. Like these are tools, right, that some young people might use to help express themselves fully. So and coming maybe from another adult, a parent might feel it's more informed than their 10-year-old. Sometimes it is hard to take a 10-year-old's knowledge base. They're like, yeah, no, dogs don't ever do that. And you're like, I think they do. So I get it. I understand. Okay. So the last piece of this is that a school should be a place where all identities can find joy. And I don't just mean sexual orientation or gender identity. I'm thinking religion, race, ethnicity, and disability, all of these things. Everyone should be able to identify a space or an event at school that allows them to feel joy. And if our kids are not experiencing joy in school in some aspects, they're not going to be stoked to go. They're not going to put in that effort. We need to have things for them to look forward to where they can celebrate themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of those places could be a GSA.
Absolutely could be a GSA. I mean, it can be a variety of things, but a GSA is a great one, particularly. Yeah. And I think in saying that, we should remember that GSAs are not strictly for members of the LGBTQ plus community. It is also for allies. So you're showing up as an ally if you are, straight cis person. You're showing up and saying like, hey, we exist, right?
Yes.
Like there are folks out here to support you. It's powerful, I think.
Yeah. And I think too, some of these spaces are so restricted by gender norms or just, the gender binary. And so maybe find some ways to unbind those from the binary, because I don't know about you. Like, there are some things that could have been really enjoyable beyond gender.
Yeah.
But like it's so gendered there that like there's a stigma attached to if you show up and you're not that particular gender.
Yeah, I could see like in a preschool if they have like a bin of boys' toys and a bin of girls' toys, right? Like anybody who's been told they're a girl is going to feel like they can only play with the bin of girls' toys.
Yeah.
And like, but maybe the G.I. Joe or whatever. Nobody even plays with G.I. Joe anymore. Gosh, I just dated myself. Whatever, Power Rangers maybe? Something that they great. Something they traditionally align with like boys' toys and they want to play with.
Yeah.
They're not going to feel like they can at that very early age. So like gendering things really inhibits exploration.
It does.
And curiosity.
And it's just such a bummer too, because the kids, they'll police each other. Like I just think about my 3-year-old who like loves trains, loves dinosaurs. Okay, that's pretty typical. Yeah. What you would think of when you're like, oh, boy stuff. Mm-hmm. You pick those, right? But he also really loves carrying around a stuffed animal and loves playing with dolls. Like, but you have like even like a 6-year-old sister who says like, oh, that's for girls.
Oh yeah.
But she's heard that from her friends.
Yeah, no, she's just parroting what other people have said.
And I'm just like, no, not necessarily. Like, does the doll have a private body part? No. Okay, well then it's not a boy or a girl. What it is. Yeah. It's like it doesn't matter. Like he can play with what he wants to play with. Like
yeah, little boys can put on pink frilly tutus if it makes them feel fun and happy.
Yeah.
Like, it's cool. I don't care.
Yeah, just like My Shadow is Pink. Like that book. That was fantastic. But like, yeah, it's just so interesting watching them police each other and then like coming in as the caregiver and being like, whoa, 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 whoa. Who says that's for boys?
Who said that to you?
Who says that's for girls?
And calling their mom and dad.
I remember I did ask. I said, and I forget what exactly had happened, but I'm like, where'd you hear that from? And then like I got the story. I'm like, oh, well, they're wrong. And then she's like, no, they're right. And I was like, whatever.
Yeah. Well, she's going to stick to her guns now, right? Yeah, I get it.
Probably shouldn't have been like, yeah, they don't know what they're talking about. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure that like, but
probably not the best.
You made the point though. Like this is not the case.
I'm like, yeah, let's just think about that a little bit. Like, it's not as black and white as we think. So,
yeah, I think sometimes for you and I, we almost are triggered when people like gender things. So we're like, no, that's wrong. You're wrong. Like,
don't think that.
We're like so desperate for them to immediately know that it wasn't okay. And maybe we don't invite them in with curiosity the way that we always should.
Yeah. Like sometimes we get out of that like teacher facilitator mode and we're like, no, don't think that. It's so bad for you.
It can be hard, especially when you're at home. Like I think when we're at work, we do a really, really good job of it because like
the home.
That's our job. And then we go home and we have these other environmental factors that are happening and like we completely like lose all of the educator appropriate mind sometimes. Yeah.
Well, I take it personally.
Yeah,
I'm like,
that's true.
How could you not know that? I'm your mother.
My child. I've done that too. I remember there was an incident where I'm like, I can't have this. Like this with my job. You know, like I had spiraled way out of control on that one. So
I know. I'm like, oh, right.
Yeah.
Have I technically taught this in a way that like you have to teach things like a billion times.
I know. And you just
ways.
assume because you're doing it at work that your children, but like they're not there.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're not absorbing that information. We just assume because we're so used to it, they should be too.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's just something we have to keep in mind.
Oh, my children.
Yeah. So the media we love is this free professional development learning module for creating safe schools for LGBTQ plus youth. And it is available with the CDC or through the CDC.
Yeah. Which is wonderful. We also want to point out some resources that we're going to include in the show notes this time. Mm-hmm. And so I am including the link to that little Justice Leaders mini course that I had mentioned on supporting trans and non-binary students. We are giving the link for the U.S. Department of Education Toolkit for what we've been talking about today. And I'm especially excited to share that because it includes the resources on how you all can find funding to support the freedom to learn for all students, which is wonderful. And then I'm also going to include a link for something really great and helpful for fulfilling the mandate to include LGBTQIA plus history and people in their curriculum. And that is the Illinois Inclusive Curriculum Advisory Council's guide. So I'm excited to share that with you. I appreciate you all listening today. It's just such a joy to share these kinds of things because I feel like this is all so important and we need to include so many more people in creating safe, inclusive spaces.
Yeah. We need to create like an army of caregivers and educators that are gonna, safeguard these young people and allow them to grow and develop to whomever they want to be.
Yeah. Oh, that was a beautiful vision statement.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So thank you all for listening and keep listening for resources.
Look out for new podcasts every other Monday on anywhere that you can find your podcasts. Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Anchor FM, you name it. We're there. If you have any questions, and we would love to hear from you, you can email us at saferjourneyspod@safejourneysillinois.org. You can also message us on social media. We have a Facebook and an Instagram that you can find us at. And let's talk about some resources for anyone who's experiencing abuse. If you happen to live in and around LaSalle or Livingston County in Illinois, please feel free to call Safe Journeys support line at 815-673-1555. 24/7, confidential, services are free. If you don't happen to be in our area, there are 2 national hotlines that you can call for support. For sexual violence, you can call RAIN with 2 N's. That's the National Sexual Violence Hotline. Their phone number is 800-656-HOPE. They also have a live chat on their website if you're interested. And for domestic violence or intimate partner abuse, you can call the hotline, which is simply thehotline.org. This is our national domestic violence hotline, and you can give them a call at 800-799-SAFE or chat live on the website. Thanks for listening.